Rock and roll has always been sold as an American and British story, from the Beatles and Stones to Hendrix and Zeppelin. But while the spotlight stayed on London, Liverpool, and Los Angeles, something else was happening around the world. In the backstreets of Buenos Aires, the clubs of Tokyo, the mountains of Chile, and the markets of West Africa, young musicians picked up guitars, plugged into cheap amps, and rewrote the language of rock in their own voices. These weren't just copycats of the British invasion. They were pioneers, mixing fuzz pedals with folk traditions, psychedelic jams with local rhythms, and turning rock into a truly global revolution. Today, most of their names are forgotten outside their home countries, but their music still burns with energy, rebellion, and soul. This is the untold story of the 15 forgotten rock bands of the 60s and 70s from outside the US and UK that you need to hear before you die. In Buenos Aires during the early 70s, while rock fans in the US were spinning Zeppelin and Purple, Argentina was finding its own guitar hero in Norberto "Pappo" Napolitano. Pappo's blues, formed in 1971, tapped directly into the hard rock and blues currents of the era, but filtered through the grit of South American streets. Their early albums like Volume 2, 1972, and Volume 3, 1973, mixed thick riffs, extended jams, and a raw heaviness that was shocking for audiences used to softer Argentine rock. Though they never gained global recognition at the time, Pappo became a cult figure, later collaborating with B.B. King. Today, Pappo's blues are celebrated as the spark that lit Argentina's hard rock scene, showing Latin America could match the heaviness of any British or American band. In Turkey, the late 60s were politically volatile, and out of that turbulence came one of the most important fusion movements in rock, Anatolian rock. Moğollar, founded in 1967, were at its heart. They fused fuzz guitars and psychedelic keys with centuries-old Turkish folk melodies and instruments like the bağlama and saz. This wasn't just Western rock played with a Turkish accent. It was a genuine hybrid that felt revolutionary. Their 1971 album Anadolu Pop is now considered a cornerstone of world psych. Moğollar toured widely in Europe, even recording in Paris, but in the West they slipped under the radar. In Turkey, however, they inspired legends like Barış Manço and Cem Karaca, proving rock could carry its own cultural DNA rather than imitate Anglo-American trends. In early 70s Japan, most rock acts were still imitating Western sounds. Sadistic Mika Band, formed in 1972 by guitarist Kazuhiko Kato and singer Mika Kato, refused to play it safe. They blended glam rock swagger, psychedelia, and Japanese avant-garde experimentation into something unique. Their album Kirofune, 1974, named after the black ships that opened Japan to the West in the 19th century, was a deliberate statement. Japan wasn't just absorbing rock, it was exporting its own vision back to the world. Produced partly in the UK, the band briefly found recognition abroad, even appearing on Top of the Pops. But their radical mix of styles and short lifespan kept them obscure. Today, their fusion of glam and psych feels ahead of its time, a lost chapter in global rock history. Deep in Benin, West Africa, a group of musicians were cutting hundreds of tracks in the 70s that blended funk, Afrobeat, highlife, and crucially, psychedelic rock guitar. Orchestra Polyrhythmo de Cotonou were rooted in Vodun rhythms and local folklore. but their guitarists laced their music with fuzz pedals and wah-wah riffs straight out of Hendrix's playbook. Songs like Say Bajo show how African spirituality and Western rock meshed into something cosmic. Though they released countless singles on small Beninese labels, most never made it out of West Africa. Only in the 2000s did European reissue labels unearth their catalog, revealing one of the most prolific and innovative African bands of the 1970s. For global rock fans, Polyrhythmo proved that psychedelic fire was burning far beyond London or San Francisco. While Japanese rock in the late 60s often copied Western bands, Happy and broke the mold. Formed in 1969 by Hiromi Hosono, Takashi Matsumoto, Eiichi Otaki, and Shigeru Suzuki, they insisted on singing entirely in Japanese at a time when English dominated rock lyrics. This was a bold move. Many critics doubted rock could work in Japanese. But albums like Kazamachi Roman, 1971, silenced those doubts, marrying poetic Japanese lyrics with folk rock and psychedelia. Happy End proved that rock could be localized without losing authenticity. Though they disbanded in 1973, their members went on to shape Japanese pop and electronic music. Hosono later helped form Yellow Magic Orchestra. For Japan, Happy End were a cultural turning point. For global rock, they're a reminder that authenticity often comes from embracing your own roots. In the early 1970s, Argentina's rock scene was still finding its own voice. Most bands either covered British and American hits or leaned heavily on Spanish-language ballads. But Trio Galleta, formed in 1969 by guitarist Carlos Iturbide, decided to push things harder. They started out doing faithful covers of English rock songs, but soon realized that to truly connect with their audience, they needed to bring the rawness of hard rock into Spanish. Their breakthrough came with the album Estoy Herido, 1971, a fiery mix of blues rock, soul, and proto-hard rock sung in their native tongue. It was gritty, direct, and refreshingly original. What made Trio Galleta stand out was their willingness to embrace the weight of rock, distortion, driving rhythms, and soulful vocals, without abandoning their Latin American roots. They didn't just imitate, they adapted. Though their career was short-lived, they became cult heroes in South America, inspiring future bands to abandon English imitation and embrace authentic, homegrown rock identities. When Los Shakers first appeared in Montevideo in 1964, critics dismissed them as the Beatles of the Rio de la Plata. With their mop-top haircuts and catchy early singles, it wasn't an unfair comparison. But by the late 1960s, the band had evolved into something far more adventurous. Their 1968 album La Conferencia Secreta del Todos Bar was a psychedelic explosion, filled with fuzz guitars, experimental production, and a distinctly Latin flavor that set them apart from their British idols. What Los Shakers achieved was remarkable. They proved that Latin American musicians didn't have to simply mimic British or American bands. They could take the same psychedelic spirit and make it their own. Their sound carried traces of candombe and tango, rhythms unique to the Rio de la Plata region, layered beneath swirling guitar lines and surreal lyrics. Although their international exposure was limited, Toto's Bar has since been recognized as a forgotten masterpiece of Latin psych, cementing Los Shakers as pioneers of Latin rock authenticity. By the end of the 1960s, London was alive with new sounds: prog rock, jazz fusion, psychedelic experimentation. Into this mix walked a group of musicians from Ghana and the Caribbean who would change perceptions of African music forever. Formed in 1969, Osibisa blended African highlife, Caribbean calypso, jazz, funk, and rock into a whirlwind of sound that was both infectious and groundbreaking. With their vibrant stage presence and horn-driven energy, they became one of the first African diaspora bands to break through internationally. Their 1971 debut album, produced by Tony Visconti, famous for working with Bowie and T-Rex, introduced Afro-rock to the world. Tracks like Music for Gong Gong radiated joy, while others tapped into the hypnotic grooves of funk and psych. What made Osibisa revolutionary wasn't just their music, but the cultural statement they embodied. African musicians could be global rock stars. They toured extensively, filled arenas, and put Africa on the rock map long before the world music label even existed. Their legacy is one of rhythm, color, and unfiltered energy. While the early 1970s rock world was captivated by Pink Floyd and Yes, something just as ambitious was happening in Chile. Formed in 1963, Los Jaivas spent years honing their craft before emerging as the masters of Andean progressive rock. Their music fused traditional instruments, charangos, panpipes, and quenas, with electric guitars, synthesizers, and sprawling song structures. The result was a sound that was unmistakably Chilean, yet expansive enough to stand alongside the most ambitious prog rock epics of Europe. Their crowning achievement came in 1981 with Alturas de Machu Picchu, a concept album based on Pablo Neruda's poetry. It wasn't just a rock album, it was a cultural statement, weaving Chilean identity, history, and folklore into the language of progressive rock. At a time when South America was reeling under dictatorships, Los Jaivas offered a reminder that music could carry national pride and spiritual weight. Though less known outside Latin America, their work stands as one of the most unique contributions to global rock in the 20th century. Few figures embody the idea of fusion innovator better than Erkin Koray, often hailed as the father of Turkish rock. By the early 70s, while the Western world was drenched in psychedelic sounds, Koray was doing something daring, blending Turkish folk traditions, modal scales, and instruments with fuzzed-out electric guitars. His 1974 album Electronic Turkular remains one of the great psychedelic records of all time, an intoxicating mix of Eastern mysticism and Western experimentation. Koray's genius was in refusing to see traditional Turkish music and modern rock as opposites. He wove them together seamlessly, creating hypnotic songs that felt both ancient and futuristic. His influence extended far beyond Turkey, later being cited by European psych fans and collectors as a hidden treasure of world rock. While mainstream audiences may not know his name, for those who discover him, Erkin Koray represents the thrilling moment when rock became a true global language, capable of carrying the soul of a nation. When the Western press talks about the birth of heavy metal and psychedelic rock, Japan is rarely mentioned. Yet in 1967, a group called Travelin band began to forge a sound as heavy and visionary as anything happening in London or San Francisco. Led by guitarist Hideki Ishima and vocalist Joe Yamanaka, the band embraced long, improvisational jams, thunderous riffs, and a spiritual intensity that set them apart. Their 1971 album Satori is now regarded as a cornerstone of Eastern psychedelic rock. 5 sprawling tracks of distorted, hypnotic guitar that sounded almost alien to Western ears at the time. What made them special was their ability to marry Japanese sensibilities with global psychedelic energy. Ishima's later invention of the sitarla, a sitar/guitar hybrid, only deepened their experimental edge. Though they never found massive fame outside Japan, Travelin band are today celebrated as one of the earliest groups to push rock into proto-metal territory, proving that Japan had its own claim to the heavy rock throne. In the late 1960s, as Brazil was under military dictatorship, a cultural movement called Tropicália exploded, and OS Mutants were at its wildest heart. Formed in São Paulo in 1966 by brothers Arnaldo and Sergio Dias Baptista, with singer Rita Lee, the band combined psychedelia with samba, bossa nova, avant-garde electronics, and pure irreverence. Their shows featured homemade instruments, tape loops, and onstage antics that scandalized Brazil's conservatives while thrilling a generation of radicals. Albums like OS Mutants, 1968, and A Divina Comedia ou Ando Meio Desligado, 1970, are now considered masterpieces of psychedelic experimentation. But for years, the band were virtually unknown outside Brazil, partly due to political repression and limited international exposure. Rediscovered by collectors and reissued in the 1990s, OS Mutants are now celebrated as one of the most innovative bands of the 60s, as essential to psychedelic rock as Pink Floyd or Jefferson Airplane. They remind us that genius often blooms in the shadows. From Durango, Mexico, came Los Dug Dugs, one of Latin America's earliest psychedelic and progressive rock bands. Fronted by Armando Nava, they began as a garage rock group in the mid-1960s before evolving into full-blown psych warriors by the early 70s. Their self-titled 1971 debut featured fuzz-drenched guitars, swirling organs, and bilingual lyrics that tapped into the same acid-soaked spirit gripping the US and UK, but with a distinctly Mexican twist. Los Dug Dugs never reached mainstream recognition, largely due to the difficulties of breaking out of the Mexican market at the time. Yet within Mexico, they were pioneers, opening doors for future rock and Espanol acts. Their willingness to experiment with extended jams, progressive structures, and hallucinatory textures placed them firmly in the global psychedelic conversation. Today, they are remembered as the bridge between Latin garage rock and the expansive world of prog and psych. In the early 1970s, progressive rock wasn't just an English phenomenon. Italy developed its own flourishing prog scene, known as rock progressivo Italiano. Among its finest representatives was Lou Orm, formed in Venice in 1966. Starting as a beat group, they soon embraced the symphonic, conceptual side of prog rock. Their 1973 album Folona y Sorona, a concept album about twin planets, one bathed in light and the other in darkness, is regarded as a masterpiece, often compared to the works of Yes and Genesis. What set Lou Orm apart was their combination of lush melodies, philosophical lyrics, and Mediterranean warmth. They managed to make progressive rock both complex and emotionally resonant, appealing to serious listeners without alienating casual fans. Though giants in Italy, they never broke out internationally in the way King Crimson or Yelpy did. Today, they remain one of Prog's best-kept secrets, a band that proved rock's grand ambitions were not confined to the English-speaking world.
You know, bro, there's just something special about the sound of a classic rock album on vinyl. It's how these albums were originally meant to be heard, the warmth, the crackle, and the ritual of dropping the needle on the record. It's an experience that digital just can't recreate. And if you've ever wanted to dive into that classic vinyl sound, but didn't know where to start, I've got you covered. I've been checking out this Victrola Bluetooth portable suitcase turntable. It's the perfect way to get into vinyl. You just pop it open, put on a masterpiece like Led Zeppelin's 4 or Pink Floyd's The Dark Side of the Moon, and let the needle drop on that legendary groove. The best part is, it's a suitcase design, so you can literally take your rock and roll vibes anywhere. You can move it from your bedroom to the living room, or even take it to a friend's place. And it even has Bluetooth, so you can stream music from your phone when you're not spinning records. It's the best of both worlds. This is a great starting point for any fan who wants to feel the foundation of RockLore in a whole new way. If you're interested in grabbing one for yourself, I've put a link to it in the description below. Clicking that link and buying one is an awesome way to support the channel and help us keep bringing you more deep dives into the music we all love. So go check it out, and let's get back to the countdown.
At the very top of this list stands Can, one of the most revolutionary bands in rock history. Formed in Cologne in 1968, Can were part of the so-called Krautrock movement, a German wave of experimental rock that rejected both British pop and American blues in favor of something entirely new. Their lineup included classically trained musicians, avant-garde composers, and two extraordinary vocalists, Malcolm Mooney and later, Damo Suzuki. Their 1971 album Tego Mago remains a landmark of experimental rock, blending hypnotic grooves, tape manipulation, improvisation, and proto-electronic textures. Songs like Hallelujah stretched past 18 minutes, building trance-like rhythms that would later inspire punk, post-rock, techno, and hip-hop producers alike. Can's genius lay in their ability to strip rock down to repetition and rhythm, then expand it into cosmic, mind-bending soundscapes. Though never chart toppers, their influence is immense. David Bowie, Talking Heads, Sonic Youth, Radiohead, and countless electronic artists have cited them as a blueprint. Forgotten by mainstream audiences but worshipped by musicians, Can prove that rock's most radical frontiers weren't in London or New York. They were in Germany, reshaping music for the next 50 years. The journey doesn't end here, Rock Warrior. Watch this next.